tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Full speed ahead on the climate change spending bill. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The lone holdout, Democrat Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, now says she will vote for the bill.
She's issued a statement that says she's agreed to changes in the measure's tax and energy provisions. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says the latest agreement on the act will reduce prescription drug costs, fight climate change, and close tax loopholes. But a letter sent to House and Senate leadership from 230 economists argues the act is expected to increase inflation.
Fox's Jill Nato in Washington. Senate Majority Leader Schumer says he hopes to begin debate on Saturday. In the evenly divided Senate, the vice president can cast a tie-breaking vote. Lightning struck in the park just across the street from the White House during a thunderstorm Thursday evening, leaving 4 people critically injured.
It was Park Police and Secret Service officers who witnessed the strike. They saw those people go down and immediately came to give help, rendering CPR to those unconscious victims.
It's Lindsay Watts of Fox 5 in Washington who reports D.C. Fire and EMS says that the quick response will help the victims' chances of survivability. In western New Mexico, an SUV has been driven through the annual Intertribal Indian Ceremonial Parade in downtown Gallup. New Mexico State Police say there are people who've been hurt, including 2 Gallup police officers. The driver of the SUV has been arrested. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis suspending Hillsborough County's state attorney Andrew Warren over public statements that he would not prosecute people who violate the state's new laws on abortion and gender surgery in children. DeSantis says Andrew Warren is trying to substitute his ideology for the law. Warren, defiant.
I'm still doing this job as state attorney. I'm the twice duly elected state attorney of Hillsborough County, and the governor signing something with a pen or a crayon doesn't change that.
America is listening to Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
After the polls closed, a winner has been declared in Arizona's Republican primary for governor. Former news anchor Carrie Lake beats developer Karen Taylor Robeson. Lake will face Democrat Katie Hobbs, currently Arizona's Secretary of State, in the November election. It's prison time for a man who made threats against federal health officials.
The Justice Department says Thomas Patrick Connolly Jr. sent emails threatening to kill one of President Biden's top health advisors, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Connolly is also said to have threatened Fauci's family, as well as the one-time head of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, and health officials in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. Prosecutors say Connolly used an anonymous email account based in Switzerland to make the threats. He's been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. John Langell, Fox News.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the ASEAN conference in Cambodia, calling China's response to House Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan this week provocative. Speaker Pelosi, now in Japan, says China will not isolate Taiwan by preventing U.S. officials from traveling there. China has fired missiles into the sea near Taiwan as part of live-fire military exercises in response to the speaker's visit. In Indiana, a disturbing discovery at a funeral home.
The license of a southern Indiana funeral home has been suspended after more than 30 unrefrigerated bodies, some of them badly decomposed, were discovered there last month. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita says that the State Board of Funeral and Cemetery Services approved the license suspension for the Langford Funeral Home and Family Center in Jeffersonville and its director. Police discovering 31 unrefrigerated corpses at the funeral home in early July. The discovery prompted an investigation, and at least 2 families have filed lawsuits. John Saucier, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we go. Yeah, I should have held that up there when I was reading when I was saying the... Yeah, anyhow, that's what this show is all about. I love the Constitution, and I have a certain amount of enmity for those who would try to do away with it or its important parts, and that's kind of what this show is all about. I try to highlight those who are enemies of the Constitution, help you identify them, perhaps even come up with strategies to deal with them. So let's go from the Constitution straight to Zemi Ikotny. And once again, I have to apologize. This used to be a good part of the program back in the days when both the Post and the Daily News were writing real editorials. The Post has given up the ghost. They don't write any editorials at all, and the Daily News isn't far behind. They put something in the news hole every day. They label it an editorial, but it's not really. It's usually some feel-good nonsense about something that's designed to make your tummy warm, not have any effect on your brain housing group whatsoever. Today's no exception. Our view. Opportunities are available. Check out GCC's college fair. Thinking about going back to school? I'm thinking about going back to school. Well, not really. Looking for new opportunities? Want to increase your skills to be more employable or make more money? Come to the GCC College Fair and find the career path that can make your dreams come true.
Why does it seem like the editor accidentally printed their journal? Dear Diary.
Yeah. Or perhaps an ad that GCC asked them to run. Whether it be the next Culinary Masters in GCC's Culinary Arts program or the new teachers and medical assistants who received official certificates from GCC, qualifying them to work competitively in their fields. The Manguilo Institution has been instrumental in helping countless people get the education and knowledge needed to be part of Guam's growing workforce. This sounds an awful lot like a news story, doesn't it, Jose?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to waste any more time on this. On a positive note, I think Mary Okada has worked miracles with GCC. She has taken it. She's taken it 50 years ahead. And how long has she been out there? Probably 10 years or so. It has really become quite an institution. So hats off to Mary. But editorials like this don't do anybody any good. So-called editorials like this. Okay, let's take a look and see what we got in the card for this afternoon. I have, let's see, AAFB versus the Stranger, Anderson Air Force Base versus the Stranger. I've got Therese, that is Speaker Therese Tetlahi, versus unemployed stand-up comedians, meaning she said something really, really funny. I've got Vanessa versus the Blacklist Dozen and Frank Ogden. We're going to go back to Red Rice versus Colonialism for a little bit more. And I've got Turley versus the J6 Committee, which I started yesterday but didn't really get into the middle of it. So let's go back and let's see if we can identify the mystery man, AAFB versus the AAFB versus the Stranger. And there it is on your screen, or it should be on your screen. It's not on my screen. Yeah, there it is.
Slight delay on
Yeah, a little bit of delay. Yeah, now you see there's an arrow pointing to the gentleman in the shaved head right behind Josh and between Josh and Nancy. Who is that guy and why is he in the picture? Is he some kind of security for Nancy? Does he have something to do with Anderson security? Or is he just an officious intermeddler? Or somebody who snuck in? Or perhaps even worse, a secret agent from the 19th floor? Wow. I wish somebody would help me identify that guy. You can call and tell me who you think it is, or you can post it on Facebook, but it's gnawing at me. Please help me solve this mystery out there in our international radio listening audience. I got to re-log into Facebook here. Now, let me see if anybody posted the answer I'm looking for. I got my Facebook. I see Juanita Machi, Lonnie Salas is there, Rico Blancafor, Bonnie Suba, Mark Anthony. Yeah, I don't see anybody identifying that dude. I'm really getting anxious on that one. Okay, so the first item on the card, of course, is Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. I don't think I need to belabor the point again today. We keep seeing examples almost every day of the week of those who would tell us, ignore what you know is true, go with the narrative. Next, I've got on the card, I've got Therese Tetlahi versus unemployed stand-up comedians. And this is a report that the Post did on one of their candidate forums with Thursday's candidate forum for Democrat candidates. And here's what it says. Rolling back the business privilege tax, whether the legislature should serve only part-time were some of the topics addressed during Thursday's You Decide legislative forum for Democrat candidates. The forum was hosted by Guam Young Professionals, a committee of the Chamber of Commerce. It followed the Republican Forum, which took place last month. The forum went over a number of questions ranging from economic issues to crime statistics, but of course it left out the elephant in the room, abortion. Nobody's interested in that. The forum went over a number of questions ranging from economic issues to crime statistics. Questions were asked via random lottery, and candidates were given 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Given my peek at the Democrat Party candidates, for some of the candidates, that was probably too long. The question of whether the business privilege tax should be rolled back to 4% was posed to Sabina Paris and candidate Roy Gamboa. Now, Roy Gamboa is a story all by himself. You know where Roy Gamboa works? Well, he's shown in the staffing pattern as working in the lieutenant governor's office.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, now what you're saying, but hey, wait. I thought that if you're a government employee, you can't run for public office. Well, you can't. Does the lieutenant governor know that? Well, he knows it now because the matter is pending before the Civil Service Commission. Illegal political activity on the part of Roy Gamboa. Too bad they didn't ask him about that during this forum.
Maybe he didn't know.
Yeah, well, that's the all-purpose defense, isn't it? He didn't know. So, candidate Roy Gamboa, do you plan on making any changes to our Mini-Hatch Act that would allow government employees to run for office and keep their government jobs? You don't? Well, that's interesting.
Wasn't there a dust-up about, Dennis Rodriguez's running mate?
There was a huge dust-up.
Mm-hmm. Who was working for the Guam Department of Education?
He was a ROTC instructor at the Department of Education. He asked to go from a classified position to an unclassified position. And everyone who was connected with it said, well, yeah, because he wants to run for public office. Well, the way I read the remarks made by everybody, even the director of education knew that that's why he wanted to go unclassified. And he's making like $140,000 as an ROTC instructor. Now, I'm going to have to cast off my overpowering sense of modesty here, Jose, because a lot of this is...
That's a rare event, Bob.
It almost never happens, but a lot of this is about me. So I saw these news stories, and I said, classified, unclassified, schmashified. It doesn't make any difference. If you are an elected official, if you are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the legislature, if you work at the legislature, yeah, you can do it. Otherwise, you can't. Unclassified means absolutely nothing. So I wrote a snotty letter to the director of education citing the, Efficient Expenditure of Taxpayer Funds Act or something like that, that said that anyone who broke the law could be personally liable for amounts equal to the unlawful expenditure. And I said, you know, what you're doing here is you're running up a bill of about $400 a day because his name was Cruz. What was his first name? Wow.
One I can't recall.
It'll come to me in a second. I said, because he can't keep his job and run for office. He can run for office, quit his job and run for office, or keep his job and not run for office, but he can't do both. So Rodriguez published something that came out, and Rodriguez's publication, Rodriguez spelled it out that everybody knew exactly why he was doing this, and that they acquiesced in it. The Attorney General, the Director of Education, everybody knew why he was doing it. So in a couple days after I sent that, and it got some publicity, gosh, what was his name? Cruz.
David Cruz.
David
Jr.
Cruz, yeah. A couple days after that, David Cruz resigned, and the word ultimatum came out. So I filed a complaint with the Election Commission and with the Board of Education, because I said there's a statute that says you can't cause someone to stop being a candidate by bribing him, threatening him, or whatever. And all of the stuff that was in print, it appeared that that was at least a possibility. And then I filed a complaint with the Board of Education because, again, all of the stuff that was out there in public made it appear that the director was helping David Cruz do this. And the director said some really stupid things. The director came out and said, the Attorney General has approved David Cruz's contract. Well, that's great. You know, he approved the and did the Attorney General did it say in the contract that David could run for lieutenant? No, it didn't. I wrote a letter to the Attorney General also in this, and when it was all over, Cruz decided he was going to stay with the campaign. He resigned his job with the Department of Education, but it's a classic case in point. You can't do both. Now, it's very tempting, of course, to do that because nobody wants to lose it's hard enough to be a candidate to lose your paycheck at the same time, even harder. Now, folks who are special assistants to the governor can keep drawing their paycheck and can run for public office. It's curious, it didn't happen this year, but a lot of times during election season, you see a migration of people in the executive branch migrating to positions of special assistant to the governor.
Of course.
Yeah, they may have even had another position in the governor's office, but all of a sudden they're retitled a special assistant, right? Yeah. And then at the legislature, you know, back in the day, if you were a legislative employee and you wanted to be a candidate, you had to quit. Now it's not only tolerated, it's encouraged. And the thinking is, if you are a legislative employee and you run, you're running against your boss. Because running for the legislature is a 15-man game of musical chairs. When the music stops, there are only 15 chairs out there. And if you're number 16 and your employee plops his fat butt down in number 15, you have every right to say, why in the hell did I keep that guy in the payroll? It just doesn't make any sense at all. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Civil Service Commission gets out from under this one. I suspect that he didn't know defense will come into play. And then how was it that the lieutenant governor didn't know? Guy worked for him.
And I think they remember the 2018 election kerfuffle with Dennis Rodriguez and Vince Cruz. I'm sure they remember it.
One would think so.
Because we did.
Yeah, David Cruz. I don't know if David Cruz, of course, David Cruz had that golden parachute, and he could lose the election and always go back to his $140,000 a year job. I don't know if he did that or whatever happened to David Cruz. Maybe he got all his hair shaved off, and he was the mystery man out at Anderson with Nancy and Josh.
Nope.
No. Okay. All right. Yeah. So good that you remembered that because it's a classic example of how it's supposed to work. When somebody says, "Hey, you can't do that," he's got a choice. And my quibble with the director of education was, you have to be really careful how you phrase that. You could say, as a candidate for election, you can't hold a position in this department. You could say that, or you could say, as an employee of this department, you cannot be a candidate for election. I'm going to have to take some action. But you can't, and this is why I made a complaint to the Board of Education. I don't think you can say, if you want to keep your job, you got to get out of the campaign. I think that crosses the line. I think that's coercing a person to not run for office. But, of course, it took the Board of Education 2 meetings to deal with it, because the first meeting, and they did it on video, the first meeting, they decided they were going to discuss it in executive session, which they can do. And they're all getting up and walking in, and then the chairman says to council, hey, you come in here too. Not going through any of the formalities at all.
Does the candidate packet that the Guam Election Commission gives out has a question asking you if you are a GovGuam employee?
Nope.
They ought to. Well,
it's really 2 separate things, and I kind of got into it there with the idea about coercing somebody. If a person wants to run for public office, there shouldn't be any impediment to his doing it. If his job is an impediment, it's up to him to remove the impediment. Or I guess it's up to if you were the director and your employee's running for office, you can't fire him, because the way the law is set up, it's one of these crazy Civil Service Commission things. You have to report it to the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission investigates it. We know how that goes. And then the Civil Service Commission determines whether, yes, you were violating the law. And the law did say if you're violating the law, it was 1 strike and you're out, you're fired. But they modified it and said you could be terminated or suspended for up to 30 days.
Okay. And I know this is not the best source to look at, but according to Wikipedia's 2018 gubernatorial election statistics, so their entry, they state that Cruz was fired by the DOE in June of 2018. They didn't say he resigned, but they can do that for an 80-day termination.
Well, in Cruz's case, since he was unclassified, they could have, yeah. But it would have been, and if you wanted to be, bulletproof, you want to be careful how you do it. You don't say, you're unclassified, I'm going to fire you because you're a candidate for office. You just say, you're unclassified, you're an at-will employee, I don't need your services anymore, don't let the door hit you in your ass on the way out.
That's the definition, at will.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So Wikipedia doesn't get it right all the time, but he did resign. He wasn't fired. And it's kind of strange, because Gamboa right now is working, and the way things go with the Civil Service Commission, by the time they get around to doing something, the election will be over. If he wins, what are they going to do? Suspend him for 30 days?
Well, at least he didn't get blacklisted. Yeah. Could have been worse.
It could have been worse, yeah. Okay, so Roy Gamboa, who probably really understands government employment, since he is one, going on the rollback is an ongoing concern for the chamber, which has time and again called on senators to implement the tax reduction. The business privilege tax was raised to 5% in 2018 to combat the effects of Trump tax cuts. You remember people running around ringing, what a horrible thing the federal government has done to us again. They've cut taxes.
We're going to go into recession.
Exactly. Yeah. The candidates also were asked how they would ensure government services are not impacted should they support the rollback. A better question would be how we would notice government services were impacted.
Do you support government services being impacted?
Yes. Quote, I think one of the avenues is to assess the use tax, which according to the public auditor, we're under collecting by about 60 million plus. That 60 million could go toward reduction in taxes and potentially other needs in our community. So this is something that I'm open to looking at. Sabina Paris, the resident eco-fascist, said. Okay, now here's how use tax works. when you bring something in, when you bring a product in from off island, you don't buy it locally, no gross receipts tax is charged on that sale because the seller doesn't live here. Now, the way the gross receipts tax works is this. If you are in business, and I'm only going to talk about the 5% rate. You are in business, you have gross receipts during a calendar month. Gross receipts means all of the money that you took in, not profits, gross receipts. You must pay 5% tax on those gross receipts. Now, let's say that you're in the T-shirt business. By the way, Jose, let's make sure that we run that T-shirt video during the big halftime show here. Folks, I think you're developing a fan base there. Everywhere I go, people are saying, who's the guy with that really neat beard wearing a T-shirt? Anyhow, back to the gross receipts tax. So if I sold $1,000 worth of T-shirts and I paid $1,200 for the T-shirts, well, I shouldn't have to pay any taxes because I lost $200, right, Jose? Wrong. I would owe 5% of $1,000. I would owe $50 gross receipts tax because that's how gross receipts tax works. Everybody who's in business on Guam pays a tax on his or her gross receipts. Now, it gets a little bit complicated with banks because, banks take in so much money, et cetera, et cetera. So the rules have to be and are different for banks. But other than that, that's pretty much how it works. So if Robert Klitzkie Enterprises set up in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, we're selling T-shirts here on Guam, I wouldn't have to pay gross receipts tax on all my sales here because I don't have any gross receipts on Guam, only in Wisconsin. So the use tax says that if you bring in something from outside for which no one had to pay gross receipts tax, you must pay, I think it's still a 4% use tax. Now, I think it violates the uniformity clause of the Constitution. I don't think states can do it. But of course, the uniformity clauses don't apply here. No thanks to Keneal Weir. So we can charge that 4% use tax. However, when we first started doing this back in the 60s, if you received a package at the Agania post office, which is where just about everybody received his packages, it was a community gathering place, So if you got a package, you'd get a note in your box. You'd go and you say, here's my note for my package. The clerk would say, you will have to wait because I have to call a customs agent. They'd call a customs agent. You'd take the package, you and the agent would go over to one of the tables. You'd open it up, and she would say, your use tax on this item is, and tell you and give you a chit, and you'd have to send in that chit with your check for the use tax on every single thing you bought. So if you bought a T-shirt from off island and the T-shirt cost, back in those days, you get a pretty good T-shirt for about $3, right? Yeah, the T-shirt costs $3. You'd have to pay, 4% of $3. How much is that, Jose?
I don't know.
Is it 12 cents? It's not $1.20. Must be 12 cents. Yeah, that's the way it worked. Well, that got to be kind of cumbersome. It got to be kind of labor intensive. Yeah, so the legislature changed the law, and they said that every resident of Guam has a $1,000 exemption on gross receipts, $1,000 per month exemption. So when you come in from off island, you fill out that customs form, and you present yourself and your baggage to the customs agent. Now, if you had spent $3,000 on souvenirs while you're off island, you're going to have a $2,000 taxable event. That's the way the gross receipts tax works. So I don't know what Sabina Paris is talking about here. She should stay in her lane. She should talk about eco-fascism, a subject she's very familiar with. That and all of her anti-war, anti-military rhetoric. Okay, let's take a short break here.
Bring it. Boss 104, The Point, and Star 101 are bringing you the Back to the 80s and 90s Throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Antigua this Saturday, August 6th.
Come down and get on the dance floor as I, DJ Daryl Lazama, get on the turntables, giving you the best of the 80s, 90s, and more.
Star 101, The Point, and Boss 104 will be in the house.
Yo, DJ, pump it up some more.
Plus, we have all kinds of cool stuff to give to you.
Free food giveaways,
Buckets of beer,
T-shirts, and hourly cash prizes.
the 90s Throwdown dance off.
The Back to the 80s and 90s Throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Antigua behind Circle K Beachside this Saturday, August 6th.
The party is from 8 p.m. to midnight, so come down and get your groove on.
Special thanks to Lolita Cabot of Holiday Realty and JV International. The 80s and 90s throwback this Saturday at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill. Party starts at about 8 p.m. See you there.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So here we go. So I'm still examining these candidates and their answers. Now, I can't imagine how there could be $60 million worth of uncollected use tax. Even if you eliminated the $1,000 exemption, it just seems like an awfully high figure to me. Now, Sabina may be confused because when you buy something, let's say you buy something from Amazon, right? They don't charge you sales tax when you buy something from Amazon. And let's say that the Amazon outlet that you buy from is in Texas. You don't pay the Texas sales tax on that. There's some constitutional dimension to these things. The famous old case means one that you briefed when you were in law school, was a case called International Shoe versus Washington. And this was about a company that did a mail order shoe business. And Washington attempted to charge a sales tax on the shoes that International Shoe shipped into Washington. And the Supreme Court, it got to the Supreme Court, which ruled that the mere fact that you are sending products into a state does not give a rise to a taxable event. You must have a substantial business presence in the state before that state can charge you sales tax. And it even went so far as to say even sending in an occasional drummer. Now that's a term that nobody remembers anymore. A drummer is a traveling salesman. He's the guy that goes in and visits all the stores and says, you know, Gillette blades are the sharpest thing out there. Or, you know, if you want a good movie, get one with Vin Diesel. That guy keeps on trucking. You know, that's what a drummer is or was. I suspect there probably aren't any drummers anymore. So even sending an occasional drummer into a state did not give rise to a taxable event. Now, that case was overruled maybe 5 years or so ago, primarily because of Amazon, you know, because Amazon really changed the whole retail world. And just a parenthetical note on Amazon. I remember when Amazon started, I was kind of fascinated by it because Jeff Bezos was so unconventional. You know, there were pictures of Jeff Bezos in his office. His office was 2 filing cabinets with an oak door across them. That was his luxurious office, you know. He was just plain down to earth, no frills kind of a guy. And he started out, of course, selling books. And I was a customer, still am, right? And then that's all he sold. And he was selling a lot of books. And I kept seeing stories year after year how his revenue was going through the roof, but he hadn't yet turned a profit. And I'm thinking, fine, you're selling a lot of stuff, but if you're not making a profit, this can't go on forever. Well, obviously he had a business plan that was superior to anything that anyone had ever thought. Because when he started profitability, there was no limit to it. He was the richest man in the world once upon a time. He's only like 2 or 3 now. A poor guy. Yeah. So anyhow, nowadays a state, the selling state can collect the use tax for the receiving state. And there's a lot of papers that have to be filled out and shuttled back and forth, but it is possible, and some of the states have done it. So that might be what Sabina is talking about. We should start pursuing that tax from off-island sellers. Now, the fact that it works for a sales tax doesn't necessarily mean that it would work for a use tax. Because when you get into taxes, you come up with a phrase called the incidence of the sales. So when you go to Payless and you buy a loaf of bread that costs you $10, 2 loaves of bread and they cost you $10. Payless is going to have to pay 50 cents gross receipts tax on that. But the incidence of the tax is not at the cash register. That's not where the tax arises. It arises back in the bookkeeping shop of Payless when they figure out what their gross receipts are. If it's a sales tax, the incidence of the sale is right there at the register. That's $10, sir. Sales tax is 7 cents, 7%. Your total is $10.70. So that 70 cents belongs to the government right there. So whether or not a gross receipts tax could be collected from off-island sellers, it's a really interesting question. Now, if Sabina is going to say that, I would expect her to be able to come in and post on Facebook answers to all my questions, or call up and say, Bob, I'm really glad you gave me all this earned media, and let me tell you the answers to the questions that you just raised. Because I wouldn't say something like this unless I knew it, chapter and verse. I'm not Talina Nelson. I'm not Talina Nelson referring to a 1982 Superior Court case that I've never seen. Okay, anyhow, that's what Sabina says. Gamboa said he did not believe he could support a rollback because 90% of small businesses have already been rolled back. 90% if you count the number of businesses, not if you measure, again, the incidence of the tax. He appeared to be referring to recently enacted law that imposes just a 3% business privilege tax for businesses that make up to $500,000 in gross receipts. This exemption was estimated to encapsulate about 90% of all small businesses on island. But it doesn't encapsulate the ones where we do all our shopping, like Payless and some of the other bigger businesses, right? So let me digress again. Now, I've heard politicians say, you know, they charge grocery stores gross receipts. There should be an exemption for food, and there should be an exemption for drugs. There shouldn't have to be gross receipts on that, tax on that. You know what that would mean, Jose? It would mean 5% more profit for the stores. Because if you take the gross receipts tax liability off the sale of food, no business is going to lower his price. There's no reason to. The only way the price would drop would be if you had a couple of grocery stores going head to head and one of them says, we're lowering our prices 5%. Shop over here. In other words, someone would have to gain a competitive advantage of the lowering of the gross receipts tax. The fact that the tax goes down doesn't mean the price is going to go down. All right, so Gamboa is not in favor of that. He said, quote, further rolling it back would mean the 10% companies that make more than $500,000 a year would get that benefit. And I kind of see where he's coming from there. They already got enough money. Why should we roll their taxes back? This exemption was as you were. What this would do is put heavier burden on small businesses to remain open and keep the island in a very competitive state. I don't see how. I don't see how rolling the GRT back to 4% on businesses that make over $500,000 would have any effect on the smaller businesses at all. Is the phone ringing? Is that Gamboa on the line to explain that to me? No. No, I don't think you got a winner there, Gamboa. I don't think that makes any sense at all. But he then goes on to say, are you listening out there, small business folks? I support the small businesses and what they try to do. As it stands right now, this is where I agree with Senator Sabina Paris, where we can take a look at other ways to increase revenues coming into the government. That way, more services can be provided by government agencies, Gamboa said. Now, I wonder which one of the candidates is going to say this, Jose. If I'm elected, my aim will be to see if we can provide an effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services at least at a break-even basis. Which one of them is going to say that?
Out of this one here?
Yeah, none of them.
None.
Yeah. Because they're thinking, I can't persuade anybody to say that the government is going to be more efficient. I can persuade people by saying the government's going to be more generous. So count me in on the generous side. I'll see if we can't lower taxes and increase giveaways and really do something for our people. Let's take a short break, Jose.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. More than shoes. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come on down to Chili's and create your own dynamic duel starting at $29.99. Choose any two of your favorites from these delicious options. Margarita grilled chicken, country fried chicken crispers, 6-ounce sirloin, savory ancho salmon, or Cajun shrimp. For a few bucks more, upgrade to premium entrees, such as the 10-ounce sirloin or ribeye cooked to your liking. Or go big with our famous half-rack baby back ribs. Your dynamic duel creation comes with loaded mashed potatoes. At Chili's, more life and great value happen here. Located on the second floor, Tumon Sands Plaza.
Yeah, so this is a great way. This is a great line. That way, more services can be provided by our government agencies. Yeah, well, what services did you have in mind? What's his first name? Gamboa?
Roy.
Yeah, what services did you have in mind, Roy? Well, I haven't really thought about it, but if we got more money, we'll be able to provide more services. Yeah. Candidates Fred Berdalio Jr., Darrell, Chris Malfunction, Barnett. So I guess we've doxed, or we haven't doxed, we've outed Darrell Barnett, right? He's really Darrell, not Chris. I wonder how that sits with Darrell Taggarty. He's probably angry, huh? All right. Candidates Fred Berdalio Jr., Daryl Chris Malfunction Barnett, and Roy Kanata. Well, we got two Roys running this time around. Roy Kanata were asked if they supported converting the BPT into a sales tax. Berdalio said he preferred to maintain the business privilege tax. When I look at sales taxes, those impact the consumers. And sometimes they can actually, there's a fear factor with consumers whenever they see increases in sales tax, Berdalio said. I actually want to eliminate the sales tax. Eliminate what sales tax? We don't have a sales tax. We've never had a sales tax. I actually want to eliminate the sales tax and keep the BPT, but just make sure it's affordable, balancing that with government services. Gosh. Okay, well,
well, at least he got one part of his promise done.
Yeah.
He's eliminated the sales tax.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what he's saying is this. With the gross receipts tax, since the incidence of sale is not at the register, you don't know that you're paying it. So there's no fear factor there. So when the GRT went from 4 to 5, you didn't see it. And obviously the prices went up because as Ray, too many Roys here, as Ray will remind you from time to time, Ray's dad, Bill Gibson, would tell you from time to time that businesses don't pay taxes. Businesses collect taxes. They collect them from you. So when the DRT goes from 4 to 5, the businesses raise their prices to pick up that extra 1% GRT. But you don't see it at the register, so there's no sign that says 5% sales tax, and the cashier doesn't say that'll be $10 for your groceries and 50 cents for your sales tax, Mr. Berdalio. Fred says this creates a fear factor because if people actually know what they're paying, there's a fear factor there. This guy is running for the legislature. I think if I'm afraid of anything, it's the other, that the government has the ability to raise taxes in such a manner that I don't know it. That's where the fear factor comes in. So he wants to keep the GRT, but he wants to make sure it's affordable. Well, what is affordable, Fred? It's at 5 now. Do you want to roll it back to 4 or 3? And just, the classic politician, the classic uninformed politician's answer, instead of coming up and telling you something, he avoids telling you something by saying, well, I think it should be affordable. Not I think it should be 4%, or it should be 5%. I think it should be affordable. Who can argue with that? Okay, going on, the next sentence jumps right on Fred's bandwagon. The next sentence says, there is no sales tax on Guam. The legislation that raised the BPT in 2018 created a 2% sales tax. At the time, the rate hike was intended to be temporary, with a sales tax taking effect after the tax increase expired. Now, people have asked the governor from time to time about the expiration of the 5% GRT, and people have asked her, how long do you want that 5% rate to stay in place, Governor? And she always says, forever. Yeah. The sales tax was later repealed and the BPT hike became permanent. Yeah. Kinata, on the other hand, said he believes transparency began and ended with a sales tax. Well, it never happened, Kinata, adding that he believed Guam could capture more funding and resources with the conversion because everything will be reported. There's a lot of cash business operations out there that are like skimming their way through the government. And I think probably Roy's onto something there. I think they're, you know, a lot of collecting of gross receipts tax kind of depends on honest businessmen. Because the businessman, you know, it's a self-reporting system. And unless the tax officials have some reason to think that somebody's cheating, they're not going to go out there and audit. They're not going to do the kind of work that CPAs do, where they see the cost of goods sold, your markups, your et cetera, and say, given what you sold or given what you took into your inventory last year, you're $2,000 short on your BPT. That's not going to happen. It's a self-reporting system. So, you know, the merchant, when Jose comes in to buy a pack of cigarettes, how much is a pack of cigarettes? About $10 nowadays? Really
Never
expensive.
bought a pack.
Yeah. Yeah, I smoked once upon a time, but I couldn't afford it anymore. Yeah, so the guy next door comes in and buys a pack of cigarettes for $10, doesn't have a credit card. He gives the merchant $10. Merchant says, thank you very much. Guy walks out the door. The merchant sticks it in his shirt pocket. No GRT. So I think Roy might be onto something there. Jose, it's a sign.
It is.
Yeah. And I understand there are some small business operations just to get their feet started. Maybe what he's saying is get their feet wet, but I'll go with started. But a lot of other businesses are also trying to scheme their way through the government to pay minimal and avoid taxes, Kanata said. Well, we certainly read a lot about not paying cigarette taxes, and that was $10 million. Kanata added that although he would support the proposal, he believed there still needs to be research on the matter if brought to the table. Well, that's your job, Roy. You know, if you're going to bake a cake, leave the cake in the oven until it's finished. Don't bring a half-baked cake out of the oven and serve it to your guests. And that's what you're doing here. Barnett said, hell no, to the conversation. Well, he's certainly in character, isn't he? Referring back to an initial question about addressing the rising cost of living, Barnett said taxes were bad and that a moratorium on government fee increases should also be implemented. Okay, this is called playing to the nickel seats. I believe that the relationship with businesses and the government throughout the pandemic has been very adversarial. Well, he's right on that. So I want to sit the businesses down with the legislature and have an honest conversation without either side digging their heels in the sand. And I think that's really the only way to move forward, Barnett said. Okay, now here's where I part company with Chris Barnett. He joined Speaker Trace Terlahi in rejecting the idea of a part-time legislature. Okay, Chris, you're just like everybody else. Didn't take us long to find out. You want to get on the gravy train just like everyone else. Well, of course, you gave up your full-time gig. I can understand it. So folks see being elected to the legislature as having a pretty good job, $55,307 a year, a lot of fringe benefits, a certain dignity, a certain privilege that's not accorded to everyone. You can go to every social event on the island, come in 15 minutes late, and rather than having people give you the Atan Baba, they'll praise you. Oh, and now I want to stop our proceedings and welcome Senator Chris Malfunction. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Senator, even though you're 15 minutes late and apparently can't tell time. So Malfunction, there's no malfunction there. He wants to be a senator. He wants to be a full-time senator. Therese Terlahi, this is the tagline here for this item on the cart. Therese Terlahi versus unemployed stand-up comedians. I understand that, it's never been easy to make a living as a stand-up comedian. There's no more Rodney Dangerfields out there, right? But it's gotten harder over the years because there's so much competition. And nowadays, what most people think is funny will get you canceled. So let's go to the big halftime show. And I'm going to put our high-priced model on the screen during the show. He's going to get a commission for every T-shirt I sell. The beer does not come with a T-shirt.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The last holdout signs on to the spending bill. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Arizona Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema says she will move forward with support of the $473 billion spending bill after winning a concession to remove a provision on carried interest tax. It likely means all 50 Democrats in the Senate will vote for the bill, setting up a possible tie-breaking vote by Vice President Harris. As a budget reconciliation measure, it needs only a simple majority to pass. The Senate now scheduled to begin debate on it tomorrow. FBI Director Christopher Wray told the Senate's Judiciary Committee Thursday allegations that senior FBI officials covered up information about Hunter Biden's laptop prior to the 2020 election are deeply troubling. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley says, though, the director is not taking accountability.
The FBI colluded with the big tech companies, by the way, to try and bury the Hunter Biden story, to try to protect Joe Biden, to try to interfere, frankly, in the reporting about the 2020 election. And it looks like they got by with it. And it looks like nobody's been disciplined and nothing's been done about it. And I tell you what, that is a big, big problem.
Members of the Secret Service said the U.S. Park Police rushed to the aid of 4 people struck by lightning across the street from the White House last evening.
Their officers witnessed this lightning strike and immediately began to render aid to the 4 victims, which is very critical in helping with survivability.
That's Vito Maggiola, a spokesperson for the D.C. Fire and EMS Department, who says 2 men and 2 women were critically injured in the strike at Lafayette Square Park. The Arizona Republican primary for governor has been called in favor of Kari Lake, the former news anchor who'd been endorsed by former President Trump, beating Karen Taylor Robson by about 2%. New Mexico State Police say people have been hurt in Gallup as an SUV was driven into the city's annual intertribal ceremonial parade. America is listening to Fox News.
Bring it. Boss 104, The Point, and Star 101 are bringing you back to the 80s and 90s throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Anigua this Saturday, August 6th.
Come down and get on the dance floor as I, DJ Daryl Lazama, get on the turntables, giving you the best of the 80s, 90s, and more.
Star 101, The Point, and Boss 104 will be in the house.
Yo, DJ, pump it up some more.
Plus, we have all kinds of cool stuff to give to you.
Free food giveaways,
Buckets of beer,
T-shirts, and hourly cash prizes.
The 90s throwdown dance off.
Get back to the 80s and 90s throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Anigua behind Circle K Beachside this Saturday, August 6th.
The party is from 8 p.m. to midnight, so come down and get your groove on.
Special thanks to Lolita Cabot of Holiday Realty and JV International, the 80s and 90s throwback this Saturday at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill. Party starts at about 8 p.m. See you there.
There's a new warning about polio in suburban New York City.
New York State health officials have issued a more urgent call for unvaccinated children and adults to get inoculated against polio. They're citing new evidence of possible community spread of the virus. The polio virus has now been found in 7 different wastewater samples in 2 adjacent counties north of New York City. So far, only 1 person has tested positive, an unvaccinated adult who suffered paralysis. But officials say, based on earlier polio outbreaks, there may be hundreds of other people who have been infected but have no symptoms yet. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
Another heat wave is triggering heat advisories for a big swath of the country's midsection on Friday.
South Dakota, southward, down through Texas. Mid-upper 90s, lower 100s. With some records possible.
That's meteorologist Tony Fracasso at the National Weather Service. Meanwhile, heavy rain is forecast Friday and Friday night in flood-ravaged eastern Kentucky. A showdown is brewing in Florida as the governor suspends a state prosecutor for not doing his job.
If the governor thinks he can do a better job, then he should run for state attorney, not president.
Hillsborough County State Attorney Andrew Warren fired back at Governor DeSantis, the Republican who insists the state's new 15-week abortion ban be enforced. Warren has been twice elected as prosecutor. It's because of that Warren levies an accusation.
This is the governor trying to overthrow democracy here in Hillsborough County.
Governor DeSantis says Warren's refusal to enforce the ban violates the oath of his office. Warren says he's still the duly elected attorney, but DeSantis has named County Judge Susan Lopez to serve during the suspension. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Wall Street mixed on Thursday. Early morning Dow futures are trading about 75 points higher. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Second half of Tall Tales after that great halftime show that we all like so much. And I had a chance to peek at Facebook here, and we got some good posts here. We start out with Bonnie Suba, who says, when I was talking about Chris Barnett and wanting to be a senator, Bonnie Suba said, just like the pharaohs, they wear long robes, gold lace, and sit high places at the table, and then inflict laws upon you, but not them. Just like the Pharisees. And then Colin Clark comes back and says, Colin Clark. I always make that same mistake. I guess, he's a Marine, so it figures if he's a Marine, he's got guts. So it's kind of a natural mistake. Right, Jose? Yeah. Colin Clark, plenty of businesses operate without a business license. RevTax would say, we know, but we don't have the resources to go after them. I sued Paul Sablon Tiny Homes 2 years ago, only now they go after him after he has ripped people off of tens of thousands. And then we've got Peter Santos, who really understands the T-shirt business. Peter Santos says, for T-shirt sales on Guam, stock up on triple extra large, extra short. Yeah, but it was so good he only had to write it down once. He didn't even need to repeat. That's a good one, Peter. Let's see what else I got.
Does this mean he's buying a lot?
I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Henry Van Glotnia is watching. I wonder if he's back in Barstow. Probably. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this candidate forum that the young business folks at the chamber put on, and so let's see, where did I leave off? Barnett joined Speaker Therese Terlahi in rejecting the idea of a part-time legislature. Yeah, so as I said, Chris Barnett has outed himself on that one. And then here is one of the best jokes. I mean, well, it's one of the best jokes I've heard in a long time, other than the jokes I tell myself, of course. If I tell a joke, well, you know. Here is Teresa's punchline. Terlahi said moving the legislature to part-time would weaken its ability to provide checks and balances to the executive and judicial branches. You got a laugh track there, Jose? Let's hear it. Yeah. Yeah, to provide checks and balances to the executive branch.
There's only one person in the audience.
What kind of checks and balances has this sorry-ass legislature provided on anybody? You know?
They actually had a chance during their full-time stint to do a checks and balance legislation, and it failed. They failed to overrule the veto of Bill 11.
To override a veto, yeah. I mean, they had the Bob and Ray resolution, which they thumbed their nose at. They had Chris's Bill 11. They let the governor just run wild with the government, completely run wild, and they never stood up to her on anything. Checks and balances. So it just is. It's a joke for Therese Terlahi to say we need a legislature to provide checks and balances against the executive branch is nothing but a joke, and it ain't funny, Therese. So you stand-up comedians out there, you're safe. Therese is not going to be appearing on stage in Vegas one of these days. But to actually say that and to be serious about it, when this legislature had rolled over for this governor from the get-go. Okay, now we got to talk a little bit, too, about the idea of checks and balances, what that really means. And I've explained this before, but I'll try again. When you were a kid, Jose, did you ever take apart a clock, a wind-up clock?
Too many.
Yeah, or a watch?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think kids get to do that anymore because we've got, now you don't want to know what time it is, you look at your phone. So, you know, every kid used to take apart a clock or a watch, and you'd see inside there, you'd see a balance wheel. That was the one that swung, that had the big black spring, and it swung the wide arc, right? And that's where the seconds came from. That's what moved the second hand. And then that turned a shaft, and on that shaft was a gear, and that gear was connected to another gear. But somewhere in that conglomeration of gears, there was a check. A check was a piece of metal with like a V on the front that was timed to stop in the tooth of every gear as that tooth came to the top, so that the gear turns and the check stops the gear and lets one tooth go at a time. And that's how you get the second hand keeping track of seconds. So when the Constitution was enacted, people knew what checks and balances were. You know, even when I was a youngster, we knew what checks and balances were. Nowadays, people don't even understand the analogy that's being made to checks and balances. Because, you know, if you want to know what time, there's a chip in there or something like that. It does it all. So that's the principle of a check and balance, that although you have the potential for rapid movement, that potential for rapid movement is subject to these checks that keep the machine moving at a measured pace, checks and balances. So no part of the clock can cause it to go faster. So you have an executive branch, you have a legislative branch. The legislative branch is the most powerful branch of all, because the legislative branch can do it all by itself. The executive has a legislative function, because when the legislature passes a bill, they send it to the governor. If the governor likes it, the governor can sign it into law. If the governor doesn't like it, the governor vetoes it. And if the legislature doesn't override, that's the end. But it goes back to the legislature, and with a supermajority, the legislature can override the governor's veto. The legislature can take the governor right out of the legislative process and make whatever laws its supermajority wants to make. The executive doesn't have that kind of power. The executive has that limited legislative power. It also has the ability to make appointments to executive positions, but once again, the legislature has a role, because those appointments have to be confirmed by the legislature. If the legislature doesn't confirm, end of story. The executive's main function is to operate the government, and the executive has to be in operation every day. That's police, fire, etc., all of the traditional government services. So if you are the governor, you're going to have a full-time job. You're going to be the manager of here on the island. You're going to be the manager of $1 billion a year corporation, is what it amounts to. So I can understand why, you know, the governor obviously has to be full-time, because she has a job. She has work to do. If she doesn't come to work and do what she's supposed to do, sooner or later, the chunky stuff hits the fan. You could say the same thing for the Attorney General. He can't stay home and watch TV. He's got duties, he's got a job, etc. And so on with the public auditor, same thing. Senators, no. A person could be elected to the legislature and never show up, and continue to draw his pay for the whole term in the legislature. I haven't seen a senator do it. I've seen some come pretty close to it, because senators don't have a job. They don't have a duty that must be accomplished every day. The closest they come to is appropriating the annual budget. If they don't appropriate the annual budget, well, wait a minute. If they don't appropriate the annual budget, then pursuant to the Organic Act, last year's budget becomes the budget by operation of law, so they don't even have to do that. So if a single senator stays home, nothing happens. You won't even notice it, because they don't have jobs. They don't have work that must be accomplished. They have three things that there are three expectancies. We expect them to make laws. We expect them to confirm executive appointments. We expect them to appropriate money. That's it. Everything else is flush. State funerals, cookie pushing, receptions, the hundreds of resolutions that they kick out every year for such weighty subjects as honoring and commending Tun Sus Makaka for butchering his 17th hog this month or something like that. It is not an undertaking that requires perseverance. Doesn't require it. We look for it. We don't find it. We haven't found it for a long, long time. So Therese said that the legislature needs to provide checks and balances. So she also wants to provide checks and balances for the judicial branch. The judicial branch is a separate and independent branch. What are you going to do, Therese? Are you going to pass a law regulating their hours, how many cases they must hear? What? I just don't understand it. It's not much of a line for someone who's a lawyer and the Speaker of the legislature. But going back to the checks and balances, here's how it works. You make laws, and by skillfully using the lawmaking power, you can hem in the executive to do what you want him to do and to prevent him from doing what you don't want him to do. If you want to be a glorified city council and meet every week, then we should ask Congress to change the Organic Act, because that's not what you're set up to do. You're set up to make laws. And since we've had a legislature since 1950, we should be pretty close to the end of the process. You don't need to make 1,000 new laws every year. A little fine tuning here and there, something to meet emergency conditions, etc. But we haven't even updated our Uniform Commercial Code since it was adopted. What was it? Way back in the 14th Guam legislature, and we talk about attracting more business to the island. Our laws are not in good shape at all, and this idea of we need a legislature to checks and balances. We need a legislature to appropriate money. And that's where you can really get a handle on the executive branch. You can appropriate money for the things you want to see happen, and you don't appropriate money for things you don't want to see happen. You can put conditions into your appropriations. You can make laws that deal with the size, organization of the government. You got a dynamite reorganization law on the books now that the governor's never touched. But this idea, we need a full-time legislature to serve as checks and balances on the governor, it's nonsense. You've got all the power that you need right now. I mean, you'd have all the power that you need if you sat for 230 days a year, which is what I want to see. Okay, she goes on to say this. I think legislatures must become intimately familiar with the years-long problems that will not be resolved by quick-fix legislations. Now, I don't know if she means legislators or legislators. I think she means legislators. Okay, so I'm going to read it that way. I think legislators must become intimately familiar with the years-long problems that will not be solved by quick-fix legislation. Why aren't you doing it now then, Therese? You picked up the cudgel on the mandatory medical Arbitration Act, and you had a lot of public hearings, et cetera, and then you dropped it like a hot potato. Where is it now? What did you do with it? I don't see anybody taking a longer view than probably. In fact, you guys can't even put together your agenda, Therese. The last agenda I criticized unmercifully because you put in your agenda potential items for the agenda. You haven't even decided what your agenda. You can't even put together an agenda. You say, "Well, we got to be full time, so that we can be familiar with years-long problems, etc." I haven't heard anybody over at the legislature talk about the insular cases except for Tina Rose Munya Barnes, who obviously doesn't have the foggiest idea what it's about. And that is a problem that's looming right on our doorstep. I haven't seen anybody do anything with abortion except Talina and some of her cohorts. So you're just not doing that. You're not doing it as a full-time legislature. And I think there's a much better chance of that happening if we do away with the professional politicians, the political class, and let every man serve his time as a legislature. That's not two words. That's one word. Every man. That's that's your average citizen. That's Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Not a professional politician, a guy of principle who pays attention and is willing to make the sacrifices and work hard to provide good government. That's what we're looking for, and we're never going to get it as long as we have this idea of we got to pay legislatures, quote, a living wage, close quote. Now, if we went with my idea, if we had 2 30-day sessions a year, we could draw from all different kinds of people here on the island, people that want to serve because they want to serve. And a good business model that I like to cite, and I know everyone's not going to agree with this, but consider the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. You got 5 smart people there who have taken the time to really understand their business. They meet once a month. I think they get about $500 a month, and they're running a very, very tight ship on the utilities. If you haven't been around here for 20 years, you wouldn't really appreciate what a great job they've done. But they're there, and they're really doing the job, and that's what I would expect from our legislature. I would expect, common people, regular people, people that have jobs, people that have careers, that don't want to give up their jobs and don't want to give their careers to become professional politicians. People who could go into panic overdrive for 2 months every year, not at the same time, 2 months every year, keep their businesses afloat and do a good job as senators because they would not be in it for the money. They wouldn't see it as a job. And if you see it as a job, then you're thinking, the thought process goes like this. This is my job. If I don't get reelected next time, I won't have a job. So I'm going to go, in November, I'm going to find I don't have a job, and I got to find a job in a little over a month. A little over 2 months. I don't think I can do that. I got to keep the job that I got right now. Now, let me see. I got to remember that when I vote on these bills, because I don't want to do something that might cause people not to vote for me because I need the job.
We always have these debates and forums that have to do with issues. But just once, I'd like to see a forum that has to do with the position they're running for.
Yes.
Like you. Do you see your position as a job or public service?
Exactly.
That would be great to know how they see the topic. That's why that question about the part-time senators, I think, was a good question.
Yeah.
Because now we can see what the intention is.
Exactly. So we're going to head for Wrigley Field. We come back, I'm going to give another Joe a chance to get into the conversation. Or Carl, if you want to call back. I'm not done with this, but I've talked for a long time. I kind of need a rest.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Joyce Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show. Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Okay, here we are at Wrigley Field. And, hey, a spectator out there in the center field bleachers just caught that home run ball. Hey, it was another Joe. Nice catch, another Joe.
You gave me too much credit, Uncle Bob. It hit me in the head and fell into my lap.
Shoeless Joe.
Yeah, well, it still counts, another Joe. Nice work.
There you go. So you can hear the background noise, the beautiful bells. All right. So regarding Speaker Terlahi setting the agenda, is it fair to say that the Committee on Rules, the Charter Committee on Rules, is very, very influential in what goes on the agenda?
Sure. Yeah.
So would it be possible that Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes might be limiting the ability of the Speaker to set the agenda?
Well, it's Tina Rose Munya Barnes that does it, but Therese is coming out not defending herself. She's defending the institution of full-time senators. We have to have this, and I'm saying full-time senators. My butt, you guys can't even handle your own agenda. You remember they had that big kerfuffle not too long ago about whether they could discuss something or not because the committee reports weren't in. This is day-to-day operations. This is the easy stuff. This is like the bartender, coming in and making sure all the glasses are clean. This isn't even dealing with the customers, and they can't even do that. And she says, "Well, we got to be full time. You guys don't understand. It's so hard."
Well, okay, Bob. I'm kind of curious why they haven't taken the Bill 291-36, the Heartbeat Act of 2022, to the session floor to vote on. Everyone keeps attempting to convince the people that through media, whatever means, that there's been more letters emailed against the Heartbeat Act than there were in support, and all of this. Okay, so then then there's like 1,000 letters interested, right, for or against. So take it to the session floor and vote on it. Vote yes or vote no, and let's see what happens. I don't know. Does that sound right to you, or does it sound wrong?
Well, in addition, when it comes to 1,000 letters, Pete Scrow will tell you that they went down and looked at those letters, and a huge number of them were form letters. They were just copy and paste, and a lot of them came from off-island senders. So, it's kind of like the email equivalent of phone banking. If you can remember how we used to have to deal with phone banking during campaign seasons. A candidate would have 4 or 5 people as phone bankers, and every talk show host, those phone bankers would be on the line saying good about the candidate and bad about the opposition. It's the same kind of deal. But the reason that they haven't advanced it to the floor, if you heard my rap a little earlier, they got a job. They're getting paid a living wage. And if they don't get a job, if they're not rehired in November, by the first Monday in January, they got to go out and find another job, and they don't know if they can do that or not. So it's really important that we keep this job. And, if we make people angry, they might not vote for us. So the way not to make them angry at us is, not doing the wrong thing would be a good thing, but not doing anything at all is probably the safest. And that's why they don't want to put the Heartbeat Act on the floor for action by the body, because
maybe we should convince them, Uncle Bob.
Say again?
Maybe, perhaps we should start to convince them as voters. There's going to be a primary and a general. Maybe we should convince them to pay more attention and put it on the session floor to vote on. And the thing also with you said that the Public Law 20-134 that the Attorney General could, but is refusing to dissolve the permanent injunction on Public Law 20-134, and he gave all sorts of reasons. So, there you go. The pro-life, anti-abortion voters of Guam. That's right there. That's a pretty good issue right there. And I think it's understood that Doug Moylan said he would dissolve the permanent injunction adjoined to Public Law 20-134. Did I say that right, Bob?
Yeah, Doug would move to dissolve the injunction, and I've mentioned this before. I'm going to do another merchandising prop there. If you were to pick up a copy of the Pacific Island Times for this month and turn to page 8, you would find a story about leaving Camacho and that whole issue. And since there's a paywall there, I'm not going to tell you what it is now. I'm going to force you to spend $1.25 another, Joe. But the last sentence of the article reads, "It's not what Levin did. It's what Levin didn't do." Okay?
Can I ask you one question before I keep listening to your show, Bob?
I guess so.
The public law 20-134 can exist together with a Heartbeat Act. They would just simply have to adjust the wording. That's not right, because the Heartbeat Act says as soon as there's a heartbeat, whereas in public law 20-134 it's a little more strict. I don't know which is more strict, but there are exceptions in public law 20-134, which says rape and the health of the mother. So can those two, can they coexist?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Because they deal with different things. 21-34 is a criminal statute, and it says that if you do certain things, you are going to be punished criminally. The Heartbeat Act is not a criminal statute. It empowers civilians to bring suit against those who violate the provisions of the Act. So they're completely compatible. However, if 134 is resurrected, which it should be, the Heartbeat Act is kind of mooted out, provided that we have an Attorney General that enforces 134. Okay, another, Joe?
Okay. Thanks for your time, I'll just keep listening.
All right. Okay, so our Carl, I guess, was on a secret mission. He was on the line for a while, and then he rang off, and now he's back again. So it's probably better that I don't know where he was and what he was doing, because he is, after all, the most dangerous man in the room. And you want to talk about taxes, right, our Carl?
Yeah, I heard you talking about taxes, and I just wanted to chime in. You know, the U.S. tax code, it's been a while since I've read about it, but I remember reading it, something like over 90,000 pages. The bulk of that is write-offs, exemptions, stuff that, quote, the rich send lobbyists to Congress to have inserted into our tax code. And there were 4 major tax cuts in the 20th century. Thomas Sowell has written something like over 36 books. This is probably his skinniest book. It's only 13 pages. It's a booklet. It's titled Trickle-Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich. And he writes about the 4 major tax cuts in the 20th century. During the 20s, that was actually more of a series of tax cuts. But when Kennedy came into office, the top marginal tax rate was 91%. I believe that was for anything over $200,000 or something was taxed away at 91%. And, so that's really sticking it to the rich. If they really want to do that, we've been down that road before several times. After each of these tax cuts, revenues actually increased all 4 times. And the reason for that is illustrated in what happened during the Kennedy administration. Kennedy came in, and he came from a business family, and he realized that this is insane. And what that government had incentivized is they'd incentivize businesses to earn up to $200,000 and then just take all their other capital, instead of creating jobs and businesses, and put it in low tax bonds and other things, and just wait out the insanity. And what had happened is that they caused 4 recessions because of what they'd unintentionally incentivized. If the local government really wanted to do something that would create revenue, they should think more in lines of a flat tax, something that people can't monkey around with and do all kinds of fancy write-offs and stuff like that. It's just a set amount, and they pay every year, and it's done. The quote, the rich love the tax code the way it is, because there's all kinds of stuff that can be done if you have expensive tax advisors. So, you know, they're not going to do it. They're not going to think in terms of flat tax or something innovative like that that would really work to create jobs. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately. But if they were really serious, they would do something really innovative like that. It's unfortunate, but we have to live with the results of it.
Okay, Carl, I hear what you're saying. When you were giving your making your point about taxes, there was a guy named Art Laffer back during the Reagan administration that came up with the Laffer curve.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and Art Laffer, you know, could demonstrate in a restaurant with his pen on the back of a napkin how as taxes went down, revenue would increase, and there was a sweet spot there where, you know, you could gain the largest amount of tax revenue by setting the rate at just the right point. Very famous guy at the time, Art Laffer. Art Laffer visited Guam in what would it have been, 75, 6, somewhere back in there. I had a chance to actually go on a cruise and have a long chat with Art Laffer, because I was legislative counsel at the time, and the legislature brought him out. We went on one of those little Tumon Bay cruises, and I was just so eager to jabber with him and find out all of his stuff. The senators, not so much. So anyhow, we hired him to write a report. We paid him $100,000 to write that report. And you know where that report wound up as far as our law is concerned? Neither do I. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's more beneficial politically to appear to beat up on business people. It doesn't take courage to do it. It's the typical thing to do.
It's what we call the Roy Gamboa stance, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's sad, and we unfortunately have to live with the results of their policies, but it is what it is.
Okay, Carl, thanks for chiming in. And then we go to R. Keith, who usually has something definitive to say about the topic at issue. Go for it, R. Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. You know, I've been listening to you in regards to the inaction by the legislature regarding the various bills, and I agree with you. And I think it's a problem. It points to a problem that is inherent not only locally but on a national scale and probably in many jurisdictions. And that is, there's become this professional, permanent politician class who, you know, have started to look at it, not started, maybe even entered into it from the very beginning, as a career position, and are more focused with keeping that career position than actually doing what the position entails, the purpose of the position, which is serving the people. And, you know, as a result, I am a big fan of term limits. They have them for presidents. I think they should have them for legislature. Now, I'm aware of all the talk about, oh, well, there's already term limits in terms of elections, but I really don't believe that's honest. I mean, you know, there's so much data out there that shows that incumbency is a wildly disproportionate benefit when it comes to elections. So I really do support the idea of term limits. What say you?
Well, I hear what you're saying, but there are a couple of things that I think you need to take into consideration. Now, if you mean by term limits, say 2 terms and you're out, You got to stay out for a term and then you come back. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you never underestimate the ability to people to hokey up the system. And I've mentioned the other day where we had a senator who ran for lieutenant governor and lost, came back, was hired by a senator as staff. At the end of that term, the senator ran and was reelected, but the hiring senator lost. Guess who gave him a job? Yeah, so they played musical chairs with, and if we had that here, you'd see that, because this hanger-on group at the legislature, is not going to go away so long as we continue on with the current system. We've got to bring in the part-timers. Second thing, it's not really that effective, but sometimes the threat of not re-election is the only check we have on keeping lawmakers in place. That once a senator becomes a lame duck, that's what happened with the Wampat 10, if you recall. Once they're lame ducks, let it go. Yeah, I might as well get a retroactive raise on my way out the door. So the fact that the possibility of not re-electing is a check. And I've seen this especially with governors. I'm not going to name any of them because I like them all. But I've seen people say, in the first term, he did this and he kind of bent to that and he kind of compromised here and there. But now it's in his second term and he can't run for re-election after this. So now it's going to be different. And it was different. It was much worse than the first term because he didn't have to worry about re-election. So that's my kind of gloss on it. One more thing, Keith. Under our system of law, we'd have to amend the Organic Act to put term limits in place. It's a possibility. It could be done, but, it would be very difficult to get anybody in the local political establishment to back it. So we might be stuck where we are.
You definitely have a point about the second term lame duck. I had forgotten about that. That is something that I have come across over the years. Living back in the States and at the federal level. Yeah, they toss everything to the wind. Hell, nothing to lose. So you might as well,
yeah,
do what you're going to do. But it's just frustrating. Not only in terms of policy, but just behavior. The professional political class, I think Washington, D.C. is the worst of it, but you see it here too. They really consider themselves royalty. And it's certainly not was the intent. If you go back to the founders, the idea was for almost like a jury of your peers type governance.
You mean that on Guam, that the elected officials being a senator or governor is not a hereditary position?
or Massachusetts.
I didn't know that.
Oh, well. Thanks for chatting.
Always good to talk to you, Keith. Let's head for Churchill Downs, Jose.
Boss 104, The Point, and Star 101 are bringing you back to the 80s and 90s throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Anigua this Saturday, August 6th.
Come down and get on the dance floor as I, DJ Daryl Lazama, get on the turntables, giving you the best of the 80s, 90s, and more.
Star 101, The Point, and Boss 104 will be in the house.
DJ, pump it up some more.
Plus, we have all kinds of cool stuff to give to you.
Free food giveaways,
buckets of beer,
T-shirts, and hourly cash prizes.
The 90s throwdown dance off.
The Back to the 80s and 90s throwdown at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill in Anigua behind Circle K Beachside this Saturday, August 6th.
The party is from 8 p.m. to midnight, so come down and get your groove on.
Special thanks to Lolita Cabot of Holiday Realty and JV International, the 80s and 90s throwback this Saturday at the Hermit Crab Beach Bar and Grill. Party starts at about 8 p.m. See you there.
Okay, so here we are, home stretch, Tall Tales, Churchill Downs, and I'm working on Speaker Therese Terlahio. Apparently has started out laying the foundation for either a side hustle or her next career. She wants to be a stand-up comedian. She came out with this line saying that she rejects the idea of a part-time legislature because a part-time legislature would weaken its ability to provide checks and balances to the executive branch. In the face of a legislature that has been the most impotent, weak, go along with the governor that probably we've ever sworn in since 1950. Therese goes on to say, I think legislators must become intimately familiar with the years-long problems that will not be resolved by quick fix legislations. Perhaps you could give us an example, Therese. I see nothing but quick fix legislations coming out of this legislature. And then she goes on to say, and listening part-time is not good representation. So if you read the whole sentence, I'm going to read the whole sentence and then parse it. I think legislators must be intimately familiar with years-long problems that will not be resolved by quick fix legislation, and listening part-time is not good representation. In other words, sitting in the session and listening has to be your main source of knowledge as to how to deal with these long-term problems. And I'm going to make an argument as somebody who's been there and done that spending the time you spent in the session hall, for the most part, is a gigantic waste of time. The perpetual question, at least during the 27th Guam legislature, the question that was asked almost every day, what time is the 2 o'clock session going to start? We spent more time goofing off, not in session, in caucus, here, there, waiting for people, etc. Listening to people who did not take the time to prepare for the session, stand up and show us how unprepared they were. And I'll give you a really good example of what I'm talking about. This didn't happen on the legislature. It happened in the show when we sent the Bob and Ray resolution to the legislature. And, of course, no one would touch it with someone else's 10-foot pole. And Tello called, and Ray and I spent a half an hour explaining to her how the Bob and Ray resolution worked, that it was something that was recognized by the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Act that had been on the books for about 20 years said that the legislature, by a majority vote, could end the governor's emergency power. And we just went on, it was kind of like, see, there's this group called the legislature. And there are 15 people there. And then down in Adelube, there's a person called the legislature. And I don't know if she listened during the session or not, but I see this all the time. I see people standing up in the legislature, and it's very clear that they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about because they haven't taken the time to do a little bit of studying, what we used to call homework. And there's a lot out there. For the base, you got to read the paper every day. You got to watch TV every night or read the TV. You got to spend some time doing scholarly research and reading about the legislative process. You ought to know you ought to have the table of contents, Mason's manual in your briefcase.
That's the thing we saw this session, is the waste of time on just arguing about process.
Yeah.
That's not new stuff.
No, it isn't. Mason's manual's been around for 100 years. There's a book called Sutherland on Statutory Construction. It's a 6-volume treatise, and it tells you everything you want to know about laws.
Do they have a section on notwithstanding?
Yeah, they do.
Let's read it then.
Yeah. So, if you're serious about your job, you'd have the table of contents for those 2 books. And you'd refer to them all the time. So when you're coming up with something, you do a little studying, and you're prepared going in saying, well, and not pretending that you're going before the Civil Service Commission where not knowing something is a complete defense. And my sense is that we're never going to get there if we continue to entertain the political class at the legislature. The people who work on senator staffs, who go from one senator to another, from Democrat to Republican, back and forth, year after year after year, and probably have more effect on what goes on in the legislature than half the senators, because half the senators don't know, and they'll let these staffers control them, basically. And, of course, the staffers are only interested in one thing, and I've explained this before. The key term for a staffer is picked up. If my senator loses, I want to make sure I get picked up, hired by another senator. So that becomes the governing principle. So the whole place is designed for lots of things. Enlightened lawmaking doesn't happen to be one of them. Now, I've seen some people that came through there that, that really buckled down and really were serious and really knew what they were doing. And sometimes I didn't agree with their politics. I give you Ben Pangilinan. Ben knew what the hell he was doing. He knew what was going on. I did not agree with his politics, but the fact that he really understood what he was doing, made him all the more effective. Senator Carl Gutierrez, same thing. Carl really understood the process and how to work with it, through it, make it work for him. But I just don't see that anymore. Okay, let's see. Any other clever comments by Teresa I can spend the rest of the program on? Terlahi said that Terlahi adding that lawmakers must serve all the people all the time and not bend to special interests, like the legislative perpetuation club, as an example. Barnett said he was totally opposed to a part-time legislature. Well, that means I'm totally opposed to him, if that's the case. And believed that the body should revert to 21 senators from today's 15. Just to expand on the speaker's points, when you talk about the legislature being the people's house with just 15 senators, too much power is concentrated in too few hats. I might say too much responsibility. Yeah, I'd like to see it go down to 11 because it's too easy to hide when there are 21 legislatures. It's too easy to take the middle road, avoid the hard decisions, just kind of skate on through it and make sure that you get reelected. If we had 11 senators, the focus would be on them. There would be no place to hide. They'd have to produce. There would just be no getting around it. Going on with more of Malefunction's comment here. Before you guys come for me, just realize that the legislative budget, when you look at the whole government, it's really just a drop in the bucket. That's what I want to hear from a senator. Fiscal responsibility. We're paying $8 million a year for what we ought to be paying $2 million for. We've kind of fallen into the habit of demonizing senators. But like Speaker said, I think checks and balances is one of the most important roles, and I'm not sure we're getting the most bang for our buck with 15 senators. He finally said something I agree with. Now, we got a list of people who apparently weren't impressive enough to get any earned media out of that. That will be William Parkinson, Kelly Marsh, Dwayne San Nicolas, Senator Joe San Augustine, Alexander Duenas, Jonathan Savaris, Sarah Thomas Netidog, John Ananich, and David Duenas. Now, a lot of these guys were on the blacklist 10, weren't they? Yeah, maybe that's why they didn't make the cut. Well, sorry, folks, if you didn't get any earned media out of this, you really didn't make good use of your time. Time for me to say goodbye to our president. Enter 70 hours of suffering because no tall tales until Monday. but we'll see you then. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Secretary of State reacts to China's war games. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Secretary Antony Blinken says the missiles launched into the sea around Taiwan in response to Speaker Pelosi's visit a few days ago is provocation.
China has chosen to overreact and use Speaker Pelosi's visit as a pretext to increase provocative military activity in and around the Taiwan Strait.
Speaking in Cambodia, where he's attending a conference of the Southeast Asian nations, Secretary Blinken saying differences between mainland China and Taiwan need to be resolved peacefully, not by force. In Washington, a deal's been struck with the last holdout Democrat senator on the $433 billion climate spending bill. Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema says she'll support it after winning some concessions. Senate Majority Leader Schumer says he believes all 50 Democrats will vote for the bill, allowing a tie-breaking vote if needed from Vice President Harris. Democrats have dubbed it the Inflation Reduction Act. Louisiana Republican Senator Bill Cassidy says it's misnamed.
We're going to be paying more in taxes, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. Congressional Budget Office says it doesn't decrease inflation. Everything they're saying, as best we can tell, is not true.
Senator Schumer says the Senate will begin debate on the bill tomorrow with plans to pass it next week. A bolt of lightning struck the park across the street from the White House last evening, leaving 4 people critically injured.
2 adult males and 2 adult females. All 4 were suffering critical life-threatening injuries.
That's Vito Maggiolo, the spokesman for the Washington, D.C. Fire and EMS Service, who says members of the Secret Service and the park police saw the strike and rendered aid immediately, possibly saving the victims' lives. An SUV was driven through a parade in Gallup, New Mexico last evening, injuring some people, including 2 police officers. The driver of the SUV arrested. America is listening to Fox News.